Beloved friends, chosen hearts, and faithful souls, listen carefully in this sacred moment. God has gathered you here for a reason, not by accident, not by coincidence, but by divine appointment. Today a message is being placed before you with urgency, with love, and with spiritual clarity. The Lord sees what you cannot always see. He knows the paths you walk, the people you trust, and the influences around your life. And right now, heaven is sounding a gentle but serious warning. There is a man around you that God is concerned about. This is not a message of fear, but a message of protection. Not a message of panic, but a message of wisdom. As chosen ones, you are called to walk in discernment, to guard your spirit, and to stay alert to the voice of God. Open your heart today, because what you are about to hear may protect your destiny, your peace, and your purpose. Let faith rise within you as we step into this powerful word together. Today this message comes with deep love and holy concern, because the Lord watches over every step of life and sees beyond human understanding. Many walk through daily routines believing that everything around them is harmless, yet the eyes of heaven notice what human eyes often miss. There are moments when God pauses the normal flow of life to give a warning, not to create fear but to bring protection. In every season the faithful are called to live with wisdom, to walk with discernment, and to remain spiritually awake. Around each life there are influences, voices, attitudes, and intentions that shape the heart and the future. Some connections build destiny, while others slowly weaken faith. The Spirit of God speaks gently to those willing to listen, guiding steps away from unseen dangers. This warning is not meant to bring suspicion toward the world, but to encourage prayerful awareness in relationships. 9. The chosen ones are never left without guidance, because the Lord promises to be a lamp to every path. At times a certain presence near life may carry confusion instead of peace, distraction instead of growth, and pressure instead of encouragement. God desires that every believer recognize the difference between what strengthens the soul and what quietly drains spiritual joy. Discernment is a gift that grows through prayer, patience, and attention to the inner voice placed by the Creator. Many people ignore small signs, small feelings of discomfort, and small moments of unease, yet those gentle signals are often divine protection speaking. Faith does not mean trusting every person without wisdom, but trusting God enough to see clearly. The heart must remain tender, but the spirit must remain alert. When something around life begins to pull focus away from purpose, away from peace, and away from righteousness, heaven takes notice. The Lord cares deeply about every detail surrounding the chosen ones, including the company kept and the counsel received. Not every smile carries good intention, and not every friendly word carries truth. Spiritual maturity requires learning to observe actions instead of being moved only by appearances. God never desires for the faithful to walk blindly into situations that could harm destiny. Prayer opens spiritual eyes, and obedience keeps the path secure. Sometimes warnings come quietly through restlessness in the spirit, through repeated concerns, or through circumstances that reveal true character over time. The wise do not ignore these moments. Protection often begins as a feeling that something is not fully right. The Lord fights battles that remain unseen, and shields the faithful from plans not understood. Staying close to God brings clarity about every relationship and every influence. The chosen ones are precious to heaven, and therefore guarded with great care. There are seasons when God calls for distance from certain voices in order to protect peace. Listening to this guidance is not rejection of people but obedience to divine direction. Walking in faith requires courage to step back when necessary, even when emotions try to hold on. The Lord values safety of the spirit more than comfort of familiarity. Every believer must remember that God sees hearts more clearly than any human ever could. When concern rises from heaven, it comes from perfect knowledge and perfect love. The faithful are encouraged to test every influence through prayer and through the truth of God's word. A life surrendered to God cannot be easily misled. Light always exposes what hides in shadows. Trusting the warning signs placed by the Lord prevents future sorrow and regret. God desires peaceful surroundings for every chosen life, places where growth and joy can flourish. When any presence begins to disturb that peace, the spirit feels the weight of it. Paying attention to these feelings is an act of wisdom, not of judgment. The Lord guides away from traps long before they appear dangerous. Obedience today can prevent pain tomorrow. The chosen ones are called to be gentle as doves, but also wise as those who understand spiritual truth. Every relationship should draw life closer to God, not slowly pull the heart away. When prayers feel blocked or joy feels reduced around certain influences, heaven is already speaking. Protection sometimes requires difficult decisions and strong boundaries. God never sends warnings without reason. Walking in faith means trusting divine concern more than personal comfort. The Lord prepares paths of safety for those willing to listen. Spiritual awareness is a shield around the heart. Remaining close to God keeps vision clear and judgment sound. The faithful are never alone in moments of uncertainty, because the voice of God remains steady and true. Discernment grows stronger each time it is honored. The chosen ones are deeply loved and carefully watched over, and that is why this message comes with such clarity today, calling every listening heart to remain prayerful, watchful, and rooted in the wisdom that flows from heaven, knowing that God speaks in many ways to protect destiny and to guard the beautiful future prepared for those who trust completely in divine guidance and continue to seek truth in every step without ignoring the gentle caution placed within the Spirit as a sacred reminder that the Lord remains attentive to every detail surrounding life, continues even now to guide, to guard, and to reveal. Beloved friends, chosen hearts, and faithful souls, listen carefully in this sacred moment. God has gathered you here for a reason, not by accident, not by coincidence, but by divine appointment. Today a message is being placed before you with urgency, with love, and with spiritual clarity. The Lord sees what you cannot always see. He knows the paths you walk, the people you trust, and the influences around your life. And right now heaven is sounding a gentle but serious warning. There is a man around you that God is concerned about. This is not a message of fear, but a message of protection. Not a message of panic, but a message of wisdom. As chosen ones, you are called to walk in discernment, to guard your spirit, and to stay alert to the voice of God. Open your heart today, because what you are about to hear may protect your destiny, your peace, and your purpose. The heart that walks with God is never left without direction, and in this hour the voice of the Lord reaches out with gentle seriousness to awaken spiritual awareness. Every chosen life is surrounded by many people, many conversations, and many influences, yet not every presence carries the blessing it appears to hold. The faithful are called to live with open eyes and sensitive spirits, understanding that God cares deeply about the environment around His children. There are connections that quietly shape thoughts, decisions, and emotions without being fully noticed. Heaven observes these things long before human understanding begins to recognize them. The Lord often sends warnings in subtle ways, through uneasiness, through repeated signs, and through a lack of peace that cannot be easily explained. These inner feelings are not accidents, but part of divine guidance meant to protect the path ahead. Spiritual discernment is more valuable than worldly confidence because it keeps the soul safe from unseen harm. Many times a situation looks safe on the surface while carrying hidden trouble beneath. God does not desire for the faithful to live in fear, but He does desire that they live in wisdom. Around every life there are voices that encourage faith and voices that slowly weaken it. The chosen ones must learn to recognize the difference. Not every influence that appears friendly is truly sent for good. Some connections drain joy, disturb peace, and create confusion instead of clarity. The Lord notices when any presence near His children begins to affect their spirit in negative ways. Protection from heaven often arrives as a warning before any real damage is done. Listening to these warnings is an act of obedience and trust. The faithful are reminded that God knows the intentions of hearts far better than any human ever could. What seems harmless today can become harmful tomorrow if wisdom is ignored. The Spirit of God gently reveals truth to those who remain prayerful and attentive. Walking closely with the Lord allows believers to sense when something is not aligned with His will. This awareness is not meant to create judgment, but to bring safety and understanding. Every chosen one carries a precious destiny, and heaven guards that destiny with great care. There are moments when God calls His children to step back, to reconsider, and to create healthy distance from certain influences. Such moments require courage and faith. It is not always easy to accept that someone nearby may not be good for spiritual growth, yet obedience to God must always come first. The Lord values the peace of His children more than any human attachment. True protection sometimes requires uncomfortable decisions. Discernment grows stronger through prayer, patience, and trust in divine leading. When a relationship or influence begins to pull the heart away from joy, purpose, and faith, the spirit feels the weight of it. These feelings are signals meant to be taken seriously. God speaks in many ways, and often he speaks through the quiet language of the soul. The faithful are never expected to navigate life blindly. The Lord promises to guide every step of those who seek him sincerely. Being spiritually alert does not mean living in suspicion, but living in awareness. The chosen ones are encouraged to test every influence through prayer and through the truth placed within their hearts. A connection that constantly brings stress, doubt, or negativity cannot be ignored. Heaven desires relationships that build up, not tear down. God surrounds his children with people meant to support their calling, not to confuse it. When any presence begins to disturb the inner peace given by the Lord, it becomes necessary to pause and pray for understanding. Wisdom protects what emotions sometimes try to excuse. The faithful must remember that God sees the full picture while humans see only small parts. Trusting divine concern brings safety even when the reasons are not fully understood. The Lord never warns without purpose. Every message from heaven is rooted in love and protection. Walking in faith means being willing to listen even when the truth is difficult. The chosen ones are precious in the sight of God, and therefore he remains attentive to every detail surrounding their lives. Spiritual growth requires the courage to let go of what harms and to hold tightly to what brings peace. When God places concern upon the heart, it is an invitation to seek deeper wisdom. Obedience to these inner warnings keeps the path clear and the future secure. The faithful are called to walk in light, not in confusion. Prayer opens doors of understanding that fear and doubt try to close. The Lord guides his children away from situations that could steal their joy or damage their testimony. Every believer must guard the heart carefully, because from it flows the direction of life. The chosen ones are never abandoned to figure things out alone. God remains a constant protector, a faithful guide, and a loving guardian. Recognizing when a presence nearby is not healthy is part of spiritual maturity. The Lord desires that his children be surrounded by truth, honesty, and genuine care. Anything that threatens that atmosphere becomes a matter of heavenly concern. Listening to God in such moments brings freedom and safety. The faithful are reminded that peace is one of the greatest signs of divine approval. When peace disappears, attention must be given. God continues to speak to those willing to hear, offering wisdom, clarity, and protection through every season of life, guiding each chosen heart gently away from harm and steadily toward the secure future prepared by his loving and watchful care. As this message settles deeply within the spirit and calls for prayerful reflection and holy attentiveness to the guidance that flows continually from the throne of grace, without adding ending sentences, in every season of life the Lord remains a faithful guardian, watching carefully over the steps of those who trust in him. The chosen ones walk through a world filled with many voices, many personalities, and many intentions, yet not all that appears good is truly safe for the soul. God sees beyond outward appearances and understands the hidden motives that human eyes cannot recognize. There are times when heaven raises concern about influences that come too close to the heart. This concern is not born from anger but from deep love and protection. The faithful are never abandoned to navigate relationships alone, because the Spirit of God continually whispers wisdom to those willing to listen. Around each life there are connections that either strengthen faith or slowly weaken it. Discernment becomes necessary in order to recognize the difference. Some people bring peace, encouragement, and spiritual growth, while others quietly bring confusion, pressure, and uneasiness. The Lord desires that his children live surrounded by influences that draw them closer to truth and not away from it. When any presence begins to disturb the inner calm placed by God, it becomes a matter worthy of prayerful attention. Spiritual warnings often arrive gently, as small feelings that something is not fully right. These feelings should never be ignored. They are part of divine guidance meant to keep the path secure. The chosen ones are called to walk with hearts full of love, but also with minds filled with wisdom. Trusting God does not mean ignoring common sense or spiritual sensitivity. The Lord provides both faith and discernment so that his children may walk safely through every circumstance. There are relationships that look harmless on the surface, yet carry hidden burdens underneath. Heaven notices these dangers long before they become visible to human understanding. Protection from God frequently comes in the form of quiet caution. Listening to that caution is an act of obedience and maturity. The faithful must learn to value peace above pleasing people. When joy begins to fade and stress begins to increase around a certain influence, the Spirit is already sending signals of concern. God never desires for His children to remain in situations that slowly steal their strength. The chosen ones carry a precious calling, and every calling must be guarded carefully. Not every person who enters life is meant to remain close. Some connections are temporary, and some are meant to be released for the sake of spiritual health. Recognizing this truth requires humility and courage. The Lord understands hearts more deeply than anyone else ever could. What seems safe to human reasoning may not be safe in the eyes of heaven. That is why prayer becomes the greatest source of clarity. Spending time with God opens spiritual eyes and reveals truths that emotions sometimes try to hide. The faithful are encouraged to measure every relationship by the fruit it produces. Good influences bring peace, honesty, respect, and encouragement. Harmful influences bring doubt, pressure, negativity, and unrest. The difference becomes clear when observed with patience. God does not call His children to live in constant suspicion, but He does call them to live in constant awareness. Spiritual awareness protects destiny. The Lord often warns long before any serious harm occurs, giving His children time to adjust their steps. Obedience to these warnings keeps the heart safe. Walking in faith requires trusting what God reveals even when it is uncomfortable. There are moments when distance becomes necessary in order to preserve inner peace. Such distance is not hatred but wisdom. The chosen ones must remember that their first responsibility is to remain faithful to God. When any presence begins to interfere with that faithfulness, heaven takes notice. The Spirit of God speaks in many ways, through prayer, through circumstances, and through the quiet language of the heart. Ignoring these messages can lead to unnecessary pain. Listening to them brings protection and direction. The Lord surrounds His children with people meant to build them up, not to tear them down. Recognizing when someone nearby does not carry that purpose is part of growing in spiritual maturity. God desires relationships that reflect love, truth, and genuine care. Anything that consistently disrupts those qualities becomes a reason for concern. The faithful are never expected to solve these matters alone. The Lord promises to guide every step of those who seek Him sincerely. Turning to God for understanding brings light into confusing situations. The chosen ones are reminded that peace is one of the clearest signs of divine approval. When peace disappears, attention must be given. Spiritual protection is a gift that should be honored with gratitude. God warns because He loves, and He guides because He cares. Every believer is precious in the sight of heaven, and therefore every detail surrounding life receives divine attention. The faithful must guard their hearts carefully, allowing only what aligns with God's will to remain close. Wisdom sometimes requires letting go, stepping back, or creating healthy boundaries. These actions are not signs of weakness, but signs of strength. The Lord walks beside His children in every decision, offering clarity to those who ask for it. Trusting in divine concern keeps the future secure. The chosen ones are called to live in freedom, not in emotional confusion. Recognizing harmful influences early prevents deeper struggles later. God remains a constant protector, guiding His children away from unseen traps and leading them towards safe and peaceful paths. Every warning from heaven is an expression of care. The faithful are encouraged to remain prayerful, watchful, and attentive to the gentle voice that speaks within the soul. Through obedience and trust, the path ahead becomes clearer with each step. The Lord never leaves His children without direction. Even now He continues to reveal, to guide, and to protect those who belong to Him, surrounding them with wisdom and light as they move forward in faith and confidence. Knowing that divine concern is always rooted in perfect love and perfect understanding, while the Spirit remains open to hear and to follow wherever God leads without adding ending sentences. God continues to speak to those willing to hear, offering wisdom, clarity, and protection through every season of life, guiding each chosen heart gently away from harm and steadily toward the secure future prepared by His loving and watchful care. As this message settles deeply within the spirit and calls for prayerful reflection and holy attentiveness to the guidance that flows continually from the throne of grace without adding ending sentences, the Lord who created heaven and earth never stops watching over the lives of His children, and nothing that surrounds the chosen ones escapes His holy attention. Every step, Every conversation and every relationship is seen clearly by the eyes of God. In this journey of faith, there are moments when divine love steps forward to give warning and direction. These warnings are not meant to frighten the heart, but to guard it. Around each believer there are influences that shape thoughts, decisions, and spiritual strength. Some of these influences are sent as blessings, while others quietly become obstacles to peace and purpose. God desires that His children walk in freedom and safety, surrounded by what builds their faith rather than what slowly weakens it. Spiritual life requires more than kindness and good intentions. It requires wisdom and discernment. The faithful must learn to sense when something near them does not carry the right spirit. Not every presence that appears friendly is truly helpful for the journey ahead. The Lord understands human hearts in ways no one else can. He sees motives, attitudes, and hidden directions long before they become visible. That is why heaven sometimes raises concern about a certain influence that stands too close to the chosen path. This concern comes as a form of protection, like a shield placed gently around the soul. Many times God speaks through small feelings of discomfort, through repeated signs, and through the quiet loss of peace. These moments are invitations to pay attention. The chosen ones are encouraged to live with open spiritual eyes, not moving blindly through relationships but prayerfully observing them. True faith does not ignore reality. True faith seeks God's guidance in every part of life. When any influence begins to bring confusion instead of clarity, tension instead of calm, and distraction instead of growth, heaven takes notice. The Lord never desires that His children remain connected to what harms their spirit. There are connections that look harmless on the outside, yet slowly pull the heart away from joy and purpose. Recognizing this requires patience and prayer. God often reveals truth gradually, allowing time for understanding to grow. The faithful must be willing to listen even when the message is uncomfortable. Walking in wisdom sometimes means accepting that not everyone who enters life is meant to stay close. Some influences serve a temporary purpose, while others become burdens that must be released. The Lord calls His children to guard their hearts carefully, because the heart is the center of peace and direction. When the spirit begins to feel heavy or troubled around a certain presence, it is not something to ignore. These inner signals are part of divine communication. God does not shout in fear, but speaks softly in love, guiding His children away from unseen harm. The chosen ones are precious to heaven, and therefore their surroundings matter deeply. Relationships should bring encouragement, honesty, respect, and spiritual growth. Anything that consistently brings doubt, pressure, or negativity must be examined with prayerful honesty. The faithful are reminded that obedience to God is more important than pleasing people. Sometimes loyalty to the Lord requires creating distance from what disturbs the soul. This is not an act of rejection, but an act of spiritual responsibility. The Lord values peace more than appearance, and truth more than comfort. Every believer is called to walk in the light of understanding rather than in the shadows of confusion. God provides discernment as a gift to protect destiny. Ignoring that gift can lead to unnecessary struggles. Listening to it brings safety and clarity. The chosen ones are never expected to manage these matters alone. The Spirit of God remains near, ready to guide every decision. Prayer opens the door to wisdom that human reasoning cannot provide. When uncertainty rises about someone nearby, the first response should always be to seek the face of the Lord. He reveals what needs to be seen at the right time. Walking with God means trusting His concern even when the full reasons are not yet understood. The faithful must remember that heaven sees the future while humans see only the present. A small warning today can prevent a great sorrow tomorrow. That is why every gentle caution from God deserves attention. Spiritual maturity grows when believers choose wisdom over emotion. The Lord surrounds His children with people meant to strengthen their calling, not weaken it. Recognizing the difference is part of growing deeper in faith. There are seasons when God calls for boundaries in order to preserve inner peace. Such boundaries are not walls of hatred, but fences of protection. The chosen ones are encouraged to evaluate every influence by the fruit it produces over time. Good fruit brings joy, peace, and spiritual progress. Troubling fruit brings anxiety, conflict, and spiritual dryness. God desires that His children remain rooted in environments where they can flourish. Anything that threatens that flourishing becomes a matter of heavenly concern. The faithful must never feel guilty for protecting their hearts. The Lord Himself places that desire for protection within them. Listening to divine guidance keeps the path secure. Even when others do not understand the decisions made, obedience to God remains the highest calling. The chosen ones walk a path guided by heaven, not by the expectations of people. Discernment protects what emotions sometimes try to excuse. The Spirit of God continually leads away from traps that cannot yet be seen, trusting that leading brings confidence and peace. Every warning from the Lord is an expression of care. He does not speak to control but to guard. The faithful are reminded that their destiny is valuable and worth protecting. When any presence near life begins to disturb that destiny, God lovingly draws attention to it. Remaining close to the Lord keeps spiritual vision clear. Through prayer, reflection, and patience, truth becomes visible. The chosen ones are called to walk in freedom, not in emotional entanglement. God prepares safe paths for those who listen to His voice. Even in difficult decisions, His grace remains sufficient. The Lord continues to watch over every detail, guiding His children step by step, protecting them from what they cannot see, and surrounding them with wisdom as they move forward in faith, learning to trust the gentle warnings placed within the heart, and allowing divine concern to shape every choice and every relationship according to the perfect knowledge and perfect love that flows from heaven without adding ending sentences. God continues to speak to those willing to hear, offering wisdom, clarity, and protection through every season of life, guiding each chosen heart gently away from harm and steadily toward the secure future prepared by His loving and watchful care. As this message settles deeply within the spirit and calls for prayerful reflection and holy attentiveness to the guidance that flows continually from the throne of grace without adding ending sentences,